So I'm back from my big snow adventure. And we're going to study some more negotiations for another 3 days or so, and then we're going to move on to some really dry stuff, legal reviews, but it's actually can be interesting. But negotiations, if you're in purchasing, is supposed to be the fun stuff. So we went through and we last week we did planning for the negotiation and preparing for the negotiation, doing a bunch of analysis here. And now we're going to do executing the negotiation tactics and other things. So this is what ISM will call a negotiation strategy. Reveal no position, reveal optimistic position, or the bait and switch. Reveal optimistic and then immediately offer a target. So remember, we've got a pessimistic and optimistic and a target position, and the target's in between the two. And this goes back to anchoring. Do you want to anchor or not? And usually, if you know the supplier is going to come in higher than you want, or really high, then anchor. You got nothing to lose. Throw out the first price. Because it's like when somebody sticks out their hand to shake your hand, you automatically will shake their hand. It's whoever offers up that first price, the negotiation will usually start from there, for as long as the price is, somewhat realistic. So you might as well start them on your side of the fence. Now, if you don't know where they're going to open, or you don't think they'll open high, then you let them throw out the first price. So that's called anchoring. But these are ISM's 3 strategies. Tactics and techniques. Processes and maneuvers used to put the strategic plan into action. So here's their philosophy. Win-win, win-lose, lose-lose. And this is kind of dated, but usually we're in this category because we're in a old line industry that isn't growing that fast. So a dollar in the supplier's pocket is a dollar out of our pocket, and vice versa. Then they want you to decide on a strategy, anchor, not, which is inherent in these positions here. And then tactics. So philosophy, strategy, and tactics. Depends on the relative power of the buyer and supplier, along with the personalities involved. So some guys you see love to bluff and do all this nonsense. I don't usually run into that with PACCAR, but you work in some of the other industries and you'll see it. Tactics will change based on the parties and situations involved. And tactics are kind of like your football audible. So the quarterback's at the line of scrimmage and he'll change the play by yelling some number. That's kind of what that's kind of the same way you use tactics in a negotiation. They take advantage of a situation that presents itself. And the choice of tactics results from planning. So what you want to do is become good or comfortable with maybe half a dozen different tactics, and I'll show you a whole list of stuff. And you kind of have those in your back pocket. So if the situation presents itself, you can play that. So that's tactics, and that's kind of maneuvering to get the guy to say something or do something for you. Techniques are not tactics. They're not encompassing enough to change the direction of the negotiation. They're more things like best practices. So there's tactics and techniques, and these techniques are things that, are kind of best practices. Prioritize issues, use questions wisely. I've never met somebody that uses questions foolishly, but okay. Listen effectively. Now, this is actually a pretty important one because he who speaks the most will usually lose the negotiation because you're just giving away information while you're talking. You want the other guy to be doing the talking. So you're asking a bunch of open-ended questions to get them going. Maintain the initiative, and you'll do this by practicing your arguments when we went over the negotiation plan. And use data. I mean, you kind of got to negotiate from a position of knowing what you're talking about. Silence. I've run into a few directors around here that love to use the silence. They just are silent for like a minute, and it's very uncomfortable. I don't use it a lot, but some people love it. Avoid emotional reactions. So I've lost it a few times, not here in negotiations, but earlier in my career. Never got me anywhere. So screaming and yelling makes you feel better, doesn't get you anything. Caucuses, we talked about this. Caucuses when one side goes out of the negotiation room, recesses when both go out. You can always say no. Deadlines. So deadlines are usually the buyer's friend, and they're usually the enemy of the seller because the seller's trying to get the deal done for quarter bonuses and things like that. Body language, we'll talk about a little bit. You got to really do some reading on it and study it to really pick up on body language. Open mind, get it in writing. Always a good idea. People will say all kinds of stuff when there's no recording. And make concessions as appropriate. Like I say, there's always things that the supplier wants other than money. And maybe some of those you'll be able to give to them. Don't negotiate beyond your physical and mental endurance. So if you're traveling, watch the jet lag. Fatigue will cloud your judgment and thinking. So try to stick to shorter negotiation sessions. I would usually go for like an hour, hour and a half, but I always had them here. So now we've got something called mirroring. And we covered this more in the Seattle University negotiation course. This is from a guy that was an FBI agent. He was a hostage negotiator, and he had some pretty good ideas. So it's repeating words that your counterpart has just spoken. Mirroring lets the other side know you're paying attention. So you're in your active listening mode. And it's also rapport building. It can be used to gather information. You use in a kind of an inquisitive inflection. So you're asking a question. An example might look like your counterpart says, I've had a really difficult year, and it seems like you're discounting all the financial and personal stress I've been under. And then you can come back with something like financial and personal stress. So tell me more. It gets them talking. And that's what you want. Remember, he who talks the most will usually lose. That's mirroring. The other one you want is labeling. So it's used to give voice to the other side's feelings. It makes them understand that you're listening to them. So good labels take the form of me saying to them, it seems like, it looks like, you look like. To label effectively, you got to avoid the use of the first person pronoun is what I'm hearing or I think, because that puts the emphasis back on me, and you want it to be on them. You want to convey that you're listening to them and understanding what they're saying. It's designed to let the other side know you understand their feelings, helps build rapport and gather information. And remember, negotiation is interaction between two human beings. So it's not always so much about fact as it is about perception. So labels are cumulative. You can use several of them. And the counterpart of labeling is mislabeling and intentional misidentification. Why would you prefer ever do that? Or because mislabeling gives the other side the opportunity to correct you. So again, it's another kind of technique to get them talking. So now we're going to get into tactics. So we've kind of covered some of the techniques. So here's some tactics that you'll see are very common: best and final offer, take it or leave it kind of thing. The false offer, I don't use this, but sometimes it's been used on me. You make an extremely attractive offer that's impossible to implement. And once the negotiation begins, you gradually back away from the position. it just, I don't like it. Good cop, bad cop, I've used a lot. Usually I'm the good cop, or the director's the good cop and I'm the bad cop. Information planting. I've seen sales guys that do this before. They leave stuff out for you to look at. The red herring is a very common sales technique I've seen. So the red herrings were used to distract the hunting dogs for the foxes. This is basically making a mountain into a molehill, or making a molehill into a mountain. Small issues blown into a major issue that eventually is conceded by the buyer. Keeps the seller from addressing the real major issue. It's basically smoke and mirrors kind of stuff. And it kind of assumes the other side's a bit of a fool. And then the missing person I've used quite a bit. This is very much like good cop, bad cop. It's like, yeah, the final authority, I can't, I agree with you, but I can't make that call. I have to go to my boss kind of thing. So those 5 common ones. Here's some more. Target, bogey, foot in the door. You'll see this often. The supplier offers low initial price. High ball, supplier offers a really high price. Strong initial offer. A phantom quote, a competitive quote that the buyer brings up during the negotiation. Remind the supplier of competition. I never like the phantom quote. I just usually flat out tell them, hey, XYZ company is 10% below you. You never tell them exactly, and you always use round numbers, but the phantom quote doesn't carry the impact that somebody that they're really afraid of does. Buyer makes an offer to close. And this is kind of related to the small matter close. It's like, yeah, okay, we got a deal, but there's this one last thing I need you to do. This is the PACCAR negotiations. We're not going to go there. We're going to go here. Encyclopedia. I don't like the way this thing pulls it up nowadays. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So it's in Word doc. The Negotiation Tactics Encyclopedia. And this has got a whole list of stuff in here. And it just goes through, and you can go through and click here. Here's your red herring. The Russian front is a great one I love. And most of you won't understand it because you don't remember Hogan's Heroes because it was on before you were born. But so it kind of tells you what it is. Offer them something they will never choose. Dress it up so it seems more reasonable and make it seem inevitable. Show how it's going to happen. Then offer the alternative that you really want them to choose. So Schultz was always afraid of, he was the German guy in the prisoner of war camp for Hogan's Heroes, and he was always afraid of going to the Russian front, which is where the name comes from. But it talks about it a little bit. And then you can also do some, this is Schultz. You can also do some research online. But what I would do is just come up with a half a dozen of these things that you like, that you're comfortable with, because some people will be comfortable with some, other people will be comfortable with others. And like I say, when the opportunity presents itself, you use it during the negotiation. But there's some interesting reading here. So that's tactics. They're like a football audible call. You're changing the play at the line based on the situation you see. Now, special considerations, fact-finding sessions. If you're working with a team, you can kind of go through some fact-finding sessions where you all sit down and plan the negotiation. Final proposal revisions. This in the government contracting, you'll see these. We just usually have a due date and say, hey, get your stuff in. Negotiating with a sole supplier like Cummins, Eaton, many of our powertrain suppliers. We've covered the BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So you want to have a solid BATNA when you're negotiating with a sole supplier. And the best weapon you can have against them is tell them that you're going to make the product in-house. Doesn't have to be true. They just have to believe that it could be true. Again, negotiation is not so much about facts as it is about perception. Other things you could do is advise the supplier you're going to drop the product, or advise the supplier there are cheaper, acceptable substitute products available. The one I like best is tell them you're going to make it in-house, because it's usually a pretty good threat for PACCAR. And then you got to document the negotiations, subject, introductory, summary. This is what ISM tells you to document. I never went to this degree, but there is a debriefing format that we get from the Seattle University boys. It looks like this. Just series of questions you can ask yourself. Oh, I guess this is ISM. I have another one from Seattle University that I like better. And then we've talked about negotiations as a purchasing cooperative or a purchasing consortium. This is usually hospitals and school districts and stuff like that. Consortiums are generally illegal with US antitrust law as long as they don't account for more than 35% of total sales in the market. And they have to be less than 10 to 25% of the company's revenue. Video conferencing, a little old school, but I prefer to do face-to-face negotiations. I have done a lot of negotiations over the phone. Video conferencing is another option. And then you got to determine, what are your requirements? And reverse e-auctions, you can use those for standard things like office supplies and stuff like that. They don't work well for custom stuff. All right. Having realistic actual cost data for the product or service being negotiated assists in obtaining a fair and reasonable price. All the items listed are advantages of this type of negotiation, except which one doesn't belong with the others. Any ideas? I'd go with A, because I would think the preparation time would be longer. Although this one's kind of weird. Exact amount. They throw these words in here that they're red herrings. They kind of want to throw you off. Let's see what these guys say. A is correct. Information supplied gives good insight into the requested profit. Yeah, maybe. Okay, one more. Which of the following elements would be least likely to be included in a summary of negotiation proceedings to lease copier equipment? So this is your write-up after the negotiations. This one's not too hard. Any guesses here? Oh, guys, this one's easy.
D?
Yeah, D. You're not gonna include engineering drawings in a summary. It better be the answer. Yeah, it is. All right, there's 9 questions out there. You guys go grab them, and we'll start going in over answers at like 2:28. Get through as many as you can. Raise your hand when you get done. Maybe we get done. Start a little earlier. Okay, let's go over some answers. I'll post the answers in the chat in case you didn't get through all the questions. So number one is Delta. The best counter to a sole source supplier is to threaten to make the part in-house. 2 is Bravo. A highball price is used to introduce an offer the supplier can later reduce. 3 is Alpha. This plan allows for the supplier to supply manager to share the purpose behind the negotiation and obtain business buy-in. 4 is Charlie. Both considerations of making the part in-house and re-engineering designing the custom part are accurate. 5 is Alpha. It's for a consortium to avoid antitrust laws. It's got to be 2 things: less than 25% of the market and less than 10% of the revenues of the company's revenues. 6 is Charlie. Negotiations at purchaser would be unwise to tell the supplier the maximum price the company is willing to pay. That one just reads kind of weird. 7 is also Charlie. Breaking off negotiations may be the best or only alternative when discussions are deadlocked, and you're looking for an accept in there. 8 is also Charlie. Establishing a negotiation range, the buying organization has already at least hinted at its position. And 9 is Delta. Mirroring and labeling our tactics and tell the other person you are actively listening to them. All right, any questions? If not, we'll cover some more negotiation stuff tomorrow. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.